Ramaphosa. We can now bring in another of our reporters, Aldrin Sampear, also standing by for us this hour. Aldrin, what are you seeing where you are?
Well, good afternoon, Tembegile. Well, good morning, actually. We are here at the stadium where we have all the media houses gathering and where the media will be sitting and following today's proceedings as they'll be taking place. But I want to bring in two guests to speak about Cyril Ramaphosa, the president of the ANC, but also the president of the country, and how interestingly, unlike any other president of the ANC before, this is a president who has had a dry run. Professor Mgomezulu, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Let's speak about this. Cyril Ramaphosa comes in as a president who has had a dry run, unlike any other president. What does a voter take away from that?
No, you are absolutely right that what happened to the current president, Cyril Ramaphosa, is unprecedented. Partly because he's unlike Kgalema Motlanthe, who was an interim president. In his case, when the then President Zuma was recalled, he was then voted in as the next president. And at the time when we were only left with a couple of months before the next election, which was then something unprecedented. So basically then he came in at the time when the ANC was not at its strongest point. So which means that he didn't receive the reception that we would have expected from a party president from all the factions of the organization. And then he had a mammoth task of trying to unite an evidently disjointed ANC and an evidently disjointed alliance. So that is one of the challenges he had to face, which is then partly the reason why I think that almost all the major events of the ANC had to be held in KwaZulu-Natal, because we know for sure that the then president enjoyed a large following, more especially in this province, but also nationally. So that it was critical that at a time when the organization is not at its strongest point, he had to come back to the roots, as it were, because we know that the first president came from here, John Langalbalele Dube came from here, and there are a couple others like Nkosi Albert Luthuli, who came in at the time when the ANC was facing challenges immediately after the 1948 apartheid policy of the National Party government. So then he was brought in to try and bring unity to the party. So having then Langalbalele Dube, who was the first president, and having Nkosi Albert Luthuli, who came in at the time when the ANC was facing challenges, it was critical then for Cyril Ramaphosa, as the president who is coming in at a very critical moment, to come back here and basically try to get that inspiration which he needs in order to convince voters that indeed the ANC is still alive.
Let me bring you into this discussion as well. Do you agree that Cyril Ramaphosa then inherited an ANC which is deeply divided at its weakest point, but does he have the wow factor to take the ANC out of the perpetual decline that it has been facing over the various elections?
I think to say he inherited a highly divided ANC is like he's an innocent president who just came from the sky. He is one of those also who was key in what is happening currently in the ANC, and so is not immune and is not innocent. And so coming to the issue of him inheriting a highly divided ANC, I think, as I've said, ANC is an organic entity, and is a contested entity because, you know, the privileges, the patronage that is there in the ANC. And so those are the things that always make people to fight for this cake. And bear in mind that number of ANC constituency are really people who are poor. You get what I mean? And if you look at, for example, the mayor at Ethekwini, he was a former, if I'm not mistaken, a domestic worker. And so can you imagine if that person is propelled into a social life of a highly middle class somebody who stays at Umhlanga, coming from Enanda? And I don't think that particular person will simply let those privileges go just like that without a fight. And so the division that is there in the ANC will persist, because the ANC is an organization that gives aspiration solution that gives also hope, and also that gives kind of a courage for a poor person who comes from the shack to say, one day I can be the leader. And so I don't think that this thing is going to happen. And so, I mean, the peace and the non-existing of the faction is not going to happen. It will always be there.
You raise a very important issue, and this is an issue around inequality, of course, South Africa being one of the most unequal countries in the world. And here's the thing, somebody actually tweeted a picture of Fikile Mbalula sitting in a private jet, and there was a picture next to that one where it was a woman with an ANC t-shirt on standing outside a mud structure, and it brought to bear exactly what South Africa is, but also, as you mentioned, that in the ANC you have the rich and the poor.
No, look, I think it is the scramble for the resources where there are no criteria who is supposed to lead our country. Why I am saying that, those pictures that you have seen for door to door, if there were doors in those rendezvous, I think it really gives us a kind of people who are leading us, people who have lost conscience, people who dare us to say, I'll come to your shack and I will source out your vote, and then from there I will go to Parliament, and then I will come after 5 years. Because look, it's such kind of a very depressing when you see a treasurer of the ANC going to a madhouse 25 years after liberation, and you hear our president saying they've built so many houses, they've connected so many electricity, but he's not telling us the real truth. That says they connect, and then at the end of the day, people, they fail to live up to the bill of those electricity, hence who have is nyoga illegal connections, as well as people who sell these RTP houses. Because why I have to stay in a house when I can't afford the food? And so that's why they sell these houses to foreign nationals. And so this issue of throwing statistics as kind of a chest beating, I think is supposed to end, and we need to deal with the real issues.
Professor Mgomezulu, speaking about the issue around houses, I remember the former Minister of Human Settlements, Tokyo Sexwale, saying one day, and he was attacked for this, saying that the ANC government cannot continuously give people houses. At some point, it must stop. And I don't see that happening anytime soon. How then do the voters relate to a party which does not, for instance, give them houses, when the expectation has been created that this is a government that gives poor people houses, that gives poor people free electricity, that gives poor people free water?
No, maybe as a point of departure, let's admit that what is happening in South Africa is something we'll never find anywhere in the world, even in the first world countries, where people are given free houses, people are given, in some instances, those houses are even furnished for free, and then they bear children, those children are taken care of by the state, almost everything. So we have technically become a social welfare state, whereby people are not basically footing the bill, as it were, not of their own choosing, by the way. It's because our situation in South Africa is different from the rest of the world in many instances. In other countries in the rest of the continent, for example, you had a clear cut between the colonial period and the post-colonial period. In our case, we were supposed to get our own liberation in 1910, but then liberation was given to the wrong people at the time. So basically, black people continued to suffer even under a free society, so to speak, after the British had pulled out. So then what you see then happening since 1994 is that the government has been trying to do a balancing act, which is not easy to do. On the one hand, you want to help those who are unable to help themselves, but then on the other hand, you are trying to do something that is not sustainable, simply because the economy is not growing at the rate you expect it to grow. Government does not have money. For government to have money, we have to increase taxes. Then the question is, how do we increase taxes when the very people who are supposed to pay taxes can't afford? So basically, we have that balancing act which we need to attend to.
Okay, Just quickly, before we wrap, I'll put you guys both on the spot. I know the manifesto is not out. My argument is that the voters don't really look through a manifesto when deciding which party to vote for. It is all about the appeal and whether they feel that a certain party appeals to them. Do you think the ANC, as it stands at the moment, or would you agree with the Ipsos poll that the ANC could increase its voter margin nationally above probably 60%?
No, basically.
Yes, no?
No.
Yes, no?
I'll answer a question, but then I want to contextualize it. I wrote a piece where I said manifestos don't win elections. You can have a perfect manifesto, people will still vote their way anyway. So in this case, the ANC is weak, but unfortunately the opposition is even weaker. So for that reason, the ANC will definitely win the elections.
And your take on this?
I think Cyril is going to win, and as I said.
But it's so weird that you say Cyril is going to win. You don't say the ANC is going to win.
No. Let's just be realistic. It's not the
Is that deliberate?
No, that's the reality. It's not the ANC that is going to win. It's Cyril that is going to win. It is quite strange that's why people have to debate that. Look how Peter Bruce has went out and support Cyril, and look at number of other race groups who support Cyril. They are not supporting ANC, but they put their hope to Cyril. If they were supporting ANC, they were supposed to be here and celebrate. But here what we see the condemned, whom the ANC still scavenge on their hope of being liberated. And the issue of policy is very important. We can't simply ignore it, because what I've heard or what I've observed is that Cyril is seriously in a very difficult position, and I think him being a Thatcherist, which to a certain extent economics, I don't think that the issue of welfare state is what is wanting. It's not. It's someone who's not going to deal with this issue of RDP and the issue of social grant. I think, as I've said, he would like active citizens who go out and generate income from themselves.
Thank you so much. There you have it. And the theme, actually, quite interestingly or coincidentally, is that the theme is building South Africa. Let us build South Africa. And that's the theme that the ANC will be launching today when it launches its manifesto and campaigning throughout the next few months ahead of the May elections. And the big question will be, will that theme resonate with the electorate, and will the ANC increase its margin, or may we find a situation where we have a coalition government? This has been the argument from some analysts, but it seems that things are turning out more slightly towards the ANC side. If you look, for instance, at the Ipsos poll saying that the ANC's margins would increase and the ANC would reach about 61%. If indeed that is the case, it will be very interesting to see what happens then, even at the provincial level, considering what is happening at Gauteng, for instance, where some have been arguing as well that in Gauteng we could see a coalition government.
Aldrin, you and your guests working up more of a sweat than the people on the stands, so we'll leave it there with you for now. ANC reporter Aldrin Sampear. We will continue.